Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning.
We are live.
Yeah, guy. Welcome, everybody. The Spit Podcast. David Lee Scales, Scott Bass with you here on this Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. Good morning, David. I see a really interesting surfboard there behind you, a Gemini by Jeff Alexander, an old buddy of mine. I grew up as a young Grom in Del Mar, getting cut off by Jeff.
A tradition that you've passed down as part of your legacy to the next Grom behind you.
No, we decided to cut the chain, break the cord, break the chain.
I don't know. There's a lot of video footage that I know exists. You and Devin, you and Ashton in the wave pool. I've seen you burn a few.
There's no video of me and Devin, nor is there video of Ashton and I.
Are you kidding? Should I post it?
No, let me see it first. You mean the Ashton footage?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, okay,
I didn't know there's footage of it.
You didn't actually take off on the wave. He was getting barreled, and you paddled into the shoulder and chandeliered the section on Ashton in the wave pool. You didn't actually take off on the wave.
I stand convicted before you.
All right.
I apologize.
He didn't even care.
I think he did, but he's such a nice guy that he says he doesn't.
I
owe you
That's
one.
Exactly right.
I owe you a bunch.
So yeah, let's get straight into it then. Jeff Alexander, tell me his story his background as a designer or shaper.
Well, like I said, he's probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years older than I am. So when I was a young kid growing up in Del Mar, he was one of the older guard guys, and he was always a very fast and dynamic surfer, and also sort of thinks outside the box, as is obvious by the surfboard behind you, the Gemini. And he had a surfboard brand called Fusion back then, and he was known for, like, he would skate down the crazy La Jolla Shores, Snake Run Street there, going down to the pier, and he was just sort of, this was back when Del Mar did not have anything east of I-5, so Del Mar was a small little community. And I mean, there was quite a few guys like Jeff, older guys that we all looked up to and were like, wow, that guy's the shit. And Jeff, still a great shaper. He moved to Hawaii, lived on the North Shore for probably 15 or 20 years, and then moved to Bali and lived in Indo somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. And I don't even know where he is now. He might be back here in San Diego for all I know.
Have you ridden the Gemini?
I don't think I've ever ridden one. No. Couple friends of mine, Lonnie Brothers and Craig Schieber, both ride those boards, or did ride those boards. And of course, Jeff rips on them. I just have never had one under my feet. I'm not against riding them. And of course, Ryan Birch has sort of, taken the design. And I don't know if he knows Jeff at all, but it'd be cool if he hooked up with Jeff, because in my opinion, Jeff is the originator of that design.
Well, Jeff is. And it's interesting. The Birch thing is it is in the same line of theory and thoughts. So I would have to think that Birch is aware of the Gemini and the connection and built from that. With a lot of different types of design, designers tend to go way out on the fringe before coming back to somewhere that's a little bit more palatable for the masses. And so the Gemini looks like it's that experiment way out on the fringe. For anybody who's not looking at our YouTube version of this and just listening in the car or something, the nose, it's like a pickle fork nose. So imagine a drag boat that has those two hulls side by side running parallel to one another. That's what the nose of the Gemini looks like. I'd say it comes out about 6 inches. There's
kind concave underneath the nose, which is really what the design's about, right? It's about giving your nose
in between.
Lift.
The concave's in between those. So each of those kind of holes that stick out have belly on them, like the boat would, and then a real deep concave between them that funnels it, and then kind of it goes narrow and then wide again as the board gets wider. So the idea is that, like Scott said, it lifts, but also propels water, like the water getting funneled into that and then out the back kind of works as it's like a
Accelerator.
rocket. Yeah, an
Yeah.
accelerator. So I haven't ridden it. John Lelane
Oh yeah, John.
he's
Yeah,
been
I'm
kind
sorry.
of tinkering with the design, took what kind of Jeff did and has made his own versions of it and tried to reach new heights with the design. And so I was interviewing him last week and he gave me that one as a board or just as a sample to ride. And he actually wants you to ride it too.
How big is
So
that board?
it's small.
Yeah, I need a bigger board.
Yeah,
I
it's
need a
small.
6'2".
Apparently with the parallel outline, you can ride smaller boards. No?
I mean, maybe it seems like every time I talk to a shaper and they're like, "Oh no, you can ride a 5'6". Trust me, it's got volume and it's got. I'm like, no, trust me, I can't ride a 5'6". Like it's amazing how, when I was 17 years old, I rode a 6'2". I should be riding a 6'2".
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more design element going on in this than just that interesting looking
I know,
nose.
and
And
just saying
John,
6'2" is kind of it's kind of ignorant. Obviously, there's more to it than the length of the board. But
yeah,
sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. I'm not even going to try to detail the design of the board because it is so I don't know, freakish. But John, when I interviewed John, when I published that, he'll explain it in great detail, way better than I could either. But I have a
Yeah.
question for you, Scott.
Hmm.
I look at that board; it looks so extreme. It
Yeah.
looks like a spaceship, honestly.
Yeah.
And I asked John, I'm like, okay, well, what's it going to do for my surfing? Because honestly, if it looks that nuts, like the board over here, this Album high performance thruster shortboard, I know what
Yeah.
I can do on that. When I get on the Gemini, am I going to go twice as fast and start doing like 720 airs and flying through the air? Like, am I going to like go backwards or something? I mean, is it going to will a barreling wave straight to me? Or is it going to let me go 3% faster? Like it looks so different. How
Yeah.
much different is my surf experience going to be on it? You tell me,
That's a
because I haven't
that's a
ridden it.
great question. That is a great question, and I haven't ridden it either. But I think what it speaks to for me is I'm willing to try anything that gives me a little bit more speed, and a board that basically goes where my eyes tell the board to go. And that to me is sort of the bar for me personally,
Yeah.
and I've been on some ugly looking boards that go exactly where I want it to go without even having to think about it. And I've been on plenty boards that don't do that. And that's sort of the difference between what we would call a magic board and just a normal board. A magic board is that board that puts David where he wants to go and allows him to have tons of speed and to do with that speed what he wants to do at will. And certainly if I know anything about Jeff Alexander, I know he likes to go fast. He is a fast surfer. And so I'm a fan of that concept. I like the idea of give me the speed and I'll do with it. I'll deal with it. I'll burn it off if I have to burn it off, but I don't want a board that just bogs and I have to kind of wank it up to speed,
Yeah.
And so I sense that board, you're not going to be doing flying 720 spins, whoever Instagram hero du jour.
Yeah.
But I do
Sierra Kerr.
sense that who?
Sierra Kerr.
Yeah. You're not going to be going Sierra Kerr on us, but I do think you'll probably get some speed going and
Right.
more will be revealed after you ride it.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I'm waiting for fins.
How big is that one?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I want to say 6.0, but it might be 5.11 or something.
And is it a 4-fin setup or a tri-fin setup?
4-fin.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't mean to disparage the design or anything like that by the description I just gave, or maybe it not allowing me to do the 720 airs. If it only does what you said, like marginally better, but faster and more easy, then the goal is achieved. It's just from a visual standpoint, when you look at something that extremely different, it then becomes a hard sell for the shaper. Like something asymmetrical. If you have an asymmetrical board, everybody on the beach looks at you and they start asking all these questions. They impose maybe limitations on it. And I think the best thing you can do as the rider, the test pilot, is eliminate all those visual cues or preconceptions and just go out and ride the board. Like if you
Well, you know
just
what?
went out and let the board kind of show you where it wants to go, you will have the
Yeah.
best experience on the board. But once you see that it looks a certain way, you start imposing these limitations.
So the two pickle forks, the two forks, you mentioned that they have belly on them, that they're bellied like a hull, right?
I'll grab them. Hold on 1 second.
Because my opinion is that those should be bellied out like a hull. And my opinion is that they should almost look like an Andrini or any
Yeah.
hull where the rail is actually an up rail so that it doesn't catch. Yeah, that looks that looks sick.
It does
That
have a
looks
little bit of it.
that totally looks doable to me. Like I get it, you know, and
I'm gonna
maybe it
talk
needs more of it.
I'm going to talk so the camera points at me, because on Zoom, if you're talking, it goes to you. So I'm just going to say nothing. Actually, it does kind of look like an Andrini, but it's not symmetrical belly. Like it's more down on the inside of the nose than it is on the outside of the nose. All right, now you talk.
Well, I love the look of that. I'm glad that it's bellied. I anticipated a full belly, but I'm sure there's a reason probably to draw the water into the channel there. The little middle nub thing, I'm just concerned about catching, you know, about the nose catching. It looks like there's a bunch of places for the nose to catch. That's my only concern. So I'm hoping that's nice and soft up there.
Yeah. So what Scott's pointing out is in between the two pickle forks, where the stringer runs up the middle, it comes into a point. So yeah, it could catch there. Why not just make that go back into its logical delta kind of thing?
And then the other thing is, if you look at that board and both the pickle forks, and then in your mind's eye imagination, you just add foam to the nose where it was taken out.
Yeah, yeah.
Why couldn't you just do that design with foam in the nose?
Which is what Birch does, right?
I imagine I would need to take a look at his latest iteration, but I've seen some of them.
I've seen Birch and certainly Tomo's that the outline is all connected, but yeah, the foam is just like a channel basically carved into the nose, the entry.
It almost feels like the pickle fork design is almost for it gives you a sense that I'm riding a high performance board. In other words, if you left the foam in it, it would be like a round board. You know what I mean? The nose would be round, kind of like the Tomos, and maybe from a marketing standpoint, that's not the look he was going for.
Right. All right.
But I don't know. Jeff would be the guy. Jeff, believe me, Jeff is also outspoken. He would go on and on and on about it, but in a good way. You know.
Let me set this down real quick.
That's a cool looking board, and I would like to ride it. Google pickle fork surfboards if you haven't.
All right.
You can find the Gemini if you just Google Gemini, Google Jeff Alexander. You can get more information about this board.
It looks like a super postmodern design, but it's actually, like you said, back from the 90s, right?
Oh, earlier than that.
Oh, really?
I think Jeff was making these in the late 80s, maybe.
Holy cow. I remember him in the 90s having a little bit of a popularity. By the way, I got feedback from a couple of things from our last show. Craig commented on Velzy, and he said, I love Dale Velzy. He was the original used car salesman. I guess Craig used to work at Clark Foam, because he says at Clark Foam, we used to have to deliver to Velzy's house, so he wouldn't come by the factory after he got caught passing on intellectual property to Walker Foam repeatedly. So Velzy would come by Clark Foam, take some notes, and then go to Walker Foam, be like, hey, this is how they do X, Y, and Z. So they were no longer allowed to let him come by. They had to go drop foam off at his house. Craig went on to say that when he was dropping off foam at Velzy's house, he had a pet goose that was mean as heck, and he would try to attack you when you were trying to get Dale to pay his bill. That goose was vicious. End quote.
Yeah, believe me, the Velzy stories are endless. I mean, there are some great ones, and I can just see Dale Velzy etching, little notes on a cocktail napkin, right outside of the Clark Foam place there in Laguna Niguel or wherever it was in the hills in the Laguna. And but by the way, we're speaking in reference to the Mount Rushmore of surfing that David and I were speaking about last week. And we did get a lot of feedback about that.
The fact that Velzy owns a goose says it all.
Yeah.
I mean, who has
Yeah.
a goose?
Yeah, no, you know what? If you're fascinated, if you really want to get into it, I mentioned it last week. Spencer Crowell put out a big coffee table book called Velzy is Hawk, and it goes into great detail about this person known as Dale Velzy, who's just an iconic, classic, just a character, just one of those guys like Mickey Dora, like Al Chapman, like, you know, that just, it's just one of the classic characters in our surf culture that that makes it such a rich culture. You know, it's just, you know what I mean? It's just not, it's a culture of characters for sure. And he's one of the biggest.
I agree. And I don't know how much this relates to that, but I think about sometimes, you know, character comes from struggle, from hardship, that sort of thing. And surfing, and especially like professional board builders, generally don't make that much money. I mean, I shouldn't say generally, just full stop, they don't make much money. And
Yeah.
for the most part, struggle to get by, find themselves later in life with zero retirement, with not owning a home, and having a hard time paying bills. There's not enough profit margin built into surfboards, and the prices haven't ever increased, you know? And so I think that all develops character. And that's kind of why I like interviewing surfboard shapers more on the podcast than professional surfers, let's say. I mean, if you get professional surfers kind of as the antithesis of that, who got management when they were 12 years old, they've been making six figures since then, and somebody books their car every country that they go to and books their hotel for them, manages their diet, all that, that breeds zero character. And I'm not saying that that person isn't a good person or anything like that. It's just when I sit down and interview somebody, dude, these surfboard shapers are characters, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. There's no
And
doubt
so,
about it.
and especially back then in that era when times were so much hard. I mean, surfing was, you know, you had to be an outcast to surf. So
Well, you need to, you or I need to interview Jeff Alexander
for sure,
because he's a full on character, man.
for
He's
sure.
great. He's a great guy.
Um,
By the way, Surfers Are the Worst
oh
t-shirts
yeah.
are available at staycovered.com. So Surfers Are the Worst, the t-shirts are available. Go to staycovered.com, pick up a leash or some wax or a scented candle along the way for you, the surfer in your life. It is the holiday season. It's
Oh, yeah.
Christmas season. It's Hanukkah season. People are giving gifts, David. What is it that you have in mind for me? What gift? I know you've been thinking a lot about what you're going to give me this holiday season. So are you going to keep it a secret, or can you give me a hint? I know there's probably something brewing.
Yeah, I saw some of the footage from Surf Ranch and I thought maybe your paddle could use some help. Webbed gloves, I thought
Really?
would be, yeah, to increase your paddle speed
All
for
right.
so you can get more waves in 2021. You know, I'm
All
here to
right.
help.
All right. That might hurt my shoulders, but thank you for the thoughts. That's very kind of
The
you.
ape gloves.
Whatever happened to those things that need to come back?
I've got another
Well,
email.
yeah, go ahead. I do too. I have some more. Obviously, the Mount Rushmore thing kind of took off, so I've got some stuff on that too. Go ahead.
No, go with that. Mine is
Okay,
not related. So
mine is. Hey, Scott David, loving the podcast. Just ordered a shirt. Here are a couple of extra nominations for your Mount Rushmore from an Australian perspective that might be worth considering. Lane Beachley, David, on the Mount Rushmore of surfing, who would she take out? According to Dave here from Maroubra, Lane is a 7-time world champion, the current chairperson of Surfing Australia. In 2015, she got the Order of Australia for service to the community, charity, and for being a mentor to women in sport. It sure would be nice to see a lady like her, or maybe Princess Stephanie on your mountain. Sounded weird. How about Mark Richards, 4-time world champion, and he also got the Order of Australia for service to sport. But more than that, MR transcends competitive surfing for his shaping career. And last but not least, Kelly Slater, an automatic choice. If he was in Australia, he'd been the prime minister already. The man's a world sporting great up there with Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, and Pele. you're probably never going to see the likes of somebody like him again. Cheers from Dave from Maroubra.
Who also corrected Mullumbimby.
A number of times. Mullumbimby.
Mullumbimby was
No, it's Malimbim.
mispronounced.
Whatever it is,
Mispronounced last time.
make sure the fly doesn't go into your mouth when you pronounce it.
Uh,
Mullumbimby.
how do you feel though about? I mean, Slater. It's hard to deny Slater, but you and I already didn't allow him from the get-go of this. Do you want to reconsider him?
Well, so our choices are basically Hunter's choices, who sent us an email, and Hunter made some great cases for the.
Hunter built off our choices. Let's start there.
Okay, fair enough. Get that ego wedged in there, David.
Yes.
But our choices are, just for everyone so they know, our Mount Rushmore as of now, as it stands now, it's Duke, John Severson, Dale Velzy, and George Greeno. And we made great cases for those. So to put Slater in there, we have to take one off. And the one that lingers for, I think, both of us is Velzy. That's the one where we're kind of like, maybe there's somebody better than Velzy that represents sort of the shaper, the character, those things we mentioned a little bit earlier. And is Slater that guy? Just whose spot does Slater take is my question to you.
I mean, Velzy is the guy that we would have to bump, but Greeno's a designer. He's not enough of a board builder to fill the board builder vacancy.
I doubt that. I agree. I disagree with you 100%.
You think Greeno
is an absolute board builder like crazy. Like right now, he's got resins on his fingers and he's stirring up pancakes. Like
yeah.
He's just,
no, I know. I don't disagree with that. He's building boards for himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what everyone's looking at.
But I'm saying Velzy represents a different role on Mount Rushmore.
So you're saying commerce, like the number of boards means something. The fact that he was a sort of like one of the, if not the first commercial board builders, would take orders under the pier.
That's largely why we put Velzy there in the first place. Certainly his character, but also they represented like a board builder that people bought surfboards from. So I feel like if we moved him off the list and put Slater on there or Lane Beachley, like it's a totally different role,
Yeah, I understand that in a weird way, we don't have like a really good surfer on our Mount Rushmore.
Dude, we might need 5 people.
No, we can't. No, we can't expand Mount Rushmore. In fact, as you may recall, the guy ran out of money. Like it's still unfinished, right? Mount Rushmore. Yeah.
That's funny.
But there can only be 4. And
no,
Dave
didn't convince me.
Yeah. I mean, to me, Slater is, he's a product of these 4 people.
Yeah.
He's not above them. He's because of them.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Okay. So what about, his argument for Mark Richards? Mark Richards is a phenomenal surfer, plus the board builder, plus not as much of a character as Velzy, but still.
I love Mark Richards on here more than I would Kelly.
Yeah.
But I don't think, again, I would say to you, Mark Richards is a product of Duke and Velzy and George Greeno and Severson. He's a product of these people. He's not on the same level as them.
All right. Well,
now here's one though that is interesting. From Andrew, sent this in. I nominate Jack O'Neill for Mount Rushmore. Without his development of the surfing wetsuit, millions of surfers would never have taken to the water. I disagree with that. People were surfing without wetsuits.
Yeah.
And they still would be.
Yep.
And thousands of surf breaks in the world would probably still be unridden. Maybe. I get it. I do think Jack O'Neill should be thrown in the mix, but I think he washes out. I think he's important to the culture, but all he did was take a technology that the military had been using and sort of went, hey, let's sell these to surfers.
I agree. It's a good contribution. And his point, even though you had counterpoints, I think his point of Jack expanded this thing to a lot more people is still valid. But you're right. It's too one-dimensional. We need more contribution to get chiseled in.
By the way, on Instagram, I've been getting a lot of Tom Blake's, because I threw it out there that
Yeah.
you and I were discussing Tom Blake. And I've been getting a lot of, I can't believe Tom Blake needs to be on there. Tom Blake, for those of you that don't know, basically, in a nutshell, he invented the fin, but he did a lot more than that. But
Yeah.
he's the one that's credited with putting the fin on the surfboard.
Yeah.
And I sent that to Matt Warshaw, and Matt was like, you know what? I think that Blake is a little bit overrated, which I found interesting. He
That is
didn't go into
interesting.
detail as to why, but anyway, I don't think Blake's on there, but I think Blake would be the next one in line. And you would kick off Greeno as sort of like the guy that changed the way we ride waves.
Yeah. The guy that
And,
took that and
I mean,
spent
and
his
you
life.
could argue that Greeno is a product of Blake. You know, without Blake, there would be no Greeno. I don't know about that. Do you think that the fin was going to happen regardless?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But all of this stuff was going to happen with it. I mean, there was going to be a surf shop regardless of Del Velzy. There was going to be,
for sure.
You know,
yeah.
That's why I think Duke and the concept of aloha, the concept of surfing is about aloha. You know, the true essence of the way the Polynesians sort of canonized what it meant to ride a wave comes from Duke. And that needs to go out around, like that's, and of course the whole concept of selfish surfers has, you know, is opposite of that, which is kind of weird.
Well, that's what's interesting about Duke and why Duke has the, you know, the full consensus of all of us for being up there is that if it had been somebody else who had introduced surfing to the world, surfing could be entirely different. Duke bringing it with aloha was his contribution, and it could have gone down an entirely different path if somebody had brought it with some other ethos, you know?
Well, I don't think it would have been another, like my opinion is that if it was a Polynesian, it was going to be with aloha. In other words, that's the spirit of the Hawaiians was, you know, we do things with a good nature and with a smile and with an optimistic outlook. Now you don't want to cross them, you know, like they'll go to war and get pissed, but for the most part, their general initial vibe is, hey, come enjoy this with us. This is fun, you know? And I think that if it was Duke, could have been one of Duke's brothers. It just so happened that because Duke was an Olympic swimming champion, he was sort of the figurehead of what it meant to be an ocean person in Hawaii.
What's funny is I Googled his name this week to grab an image of him, and the Wikipedia listing or Google itself shows Duke Kahanamoku, swimmer. It actually doesn't say anything about surfing. I mean, it does if you read through, you know, kind of the text, but it's funny that they classify him as a swimmer, which of course is deservedly so. He's won a bunch of Olympic golds.
Stockholm Olympics. How many gold medals? I want to say he went to 3 different Olympic games, maybe more.
I mean, I studied up on it, but it's been years.
I mean, it's easy for anyone to Google it and find it. But
I interviewed the guy, some scholar wrote a biography on Duke called The Waterman, The Life and Times of Duke Kahanamoku. And so I interviewed that guy, and the guy never surfed a day in his life. He was just like scholarly, and he wrote like a really detailed history about Duke and his personal life and romantic relationships and all that sort of stuff. So at that time, I knew more than I certainly know now. But yeah, it's funny that Google doesn't even, I mean, you and I, is just, he is synonymous with surfing, you know, like he is surfing. And I know about his swimming, but I don't really think about it. But for Google and the outward thing, that's what they identify him as a swimmer.
Well, I remember I worked at Surfer Magazine when we put Duke on the cover of our big issue. And I think it was, I want to say it was the 50th anniversary issue or something. Yeah. It was one of the big anniversary issues. And it was certainly, I didn't have anything to do with it. I was the online editorial director, but it was certainly something that I know Evan Slater and Chris Morrow were extremely proud of. And I think they had to kind of fight it to get Duke on the cover. For the publishers were like, how about this shot of, you know, Bruce Irons at G-Land or whatever, you know? Well, they had to fight it tooth and nail, but it was one of the most well-received covers we ever did, Surfer Magazine ever did. And again, credit goes to Evan Slater and Chris Morrow there.
You know what's funny about that Surfer Magazine doing a big issue? I was a teenager at that time, and every year, I think it might've been October was the big issue. And it got bigger every year. So like they wanted to be able to write, this is the biggest issue we've ever made. And at some point I'm getting this thing that shows up like the size of a poster. Like it no longer fit in the mailbox, not even close to fitting in the mailbox. It was just this giant, I had the realization literally as a 16-year-old, you guys are strictly doing this just to one up yourselves. Nobody cares. I don't need this magazine to be any bigger. It's plenty big. It doesn't fit in my backpack anymore. You guys are strictly doing this as like a masturbatory exercise each year to beat yourselves.
Speaking of Surfer, check out this is an email that they sent out to their subscribers.
Oh my God, yes.
Did you see this?
Yeah.
It says, "Dear Surfer Magazine subscriber, thank you for being a subscriber to Surfer Magazine. We hope you have enjoyed each issue. As of October 1st, 2020, Surfer Magazine has ceased publication. The last issue was the winter 2021 issue. However, we are pleased to inform you that for the remainder of your subscription, you will receive Men's Journal magazine, which is published by the same company that brought you Surfer Magazine. With Men's Journal, you will discover tips, guides, and expert advice on gear, adventure, style, and more from our editors." So anyway, that's basically it.
Thanks.
You get Men's Journal.
Kind of interesting. You guys can keep it. Save the postage and the trees.
Oh, Lord.
Well, hey, that relates actually to my next email.
Yeah.
Dear David and Scott, I've listened to Spit podcast for about a year now, and it's quickly become one of my favorites. Each week, I look forward to your thought-provoking banter amidst Scott and yourself. I've been a teacher at a public high school in San Diego for over 15 years, and your conversation last week emphasizing the importance of reading was spot on. This was your conversation, Scott, about encouraging people to read. He went on to say, reading is the #1 predictor of success among students, period. The correlation between the amount of reading one does and the level of success they achieve is stronger than any other comparative factor measured. It doesn't matter who you are, who you have as parents, how wealthy you are, what gender you are, what your skin color is. If you're an avid reader, there's a higher probability you will succeed in life. Your assessment that kids today do not read or read very little in comparison to past generations is unquestionably true. 60 to 80% of students in any given public school in the state of California are multiple grade levels below where they should be compared to standardized reading proficiency levels. He went on to give all of these reasons why, and why administration is kind of just pushing kids through the system. If they fall behind, just give them an easier test to let them pass. Exactly. So I cut a lot of that out, but I'm going to jump back in where he says, the reading levels at high school where I teach, which I'm withholding the name of in fear of being burned at the stake, are horrendous. It is so bad that most of the teachers no longer require any reading whatsoever as a course requirement. The administration has repeatedly requested that teachers implement a no homework policy, lower grading scales, and find ways to pass students who refuse to do anything. Being a teacher has become so depressing, and after nearly 2 decades, I am calling it quits. I can no longer be a part of the system that fails to hold anyone accountable for anything, ranging from the administration, the staff, the students, and to the parents of the students themselves. Everyone in the system is guilty in some way or another and is allowing it to fail. And sadly, no one wants to do what is needed in order to fix it. The educational system, as they say, is unequivocally broken. Anyways, I love the podcast. Keep up the refreshing discourse, and don't forget to go surfing.
Well, there's so much there to unpack, right? A lot of stuff was going through my head. First and foremost, I am so I feel passion welling up in me about how important this is to our society, that our generations read more books. If I was to think of like one nonprofit cause that I could get behind that would help everyone, and that is super simple and it's free, it's reading. More reading. Read books. It's going to open it's one of life's most fascinating endeavors. It's opened your eyes, David, I know, and my eyes, David, to things, to imagine, it's like a vast world of incredible stuff, and
Well,
I know I'm not
imagine,
spitting it out very eloquently right now, but and I'm truly passionate about this. Like,
I
we
think
need to read more.
even if people have enjoyed reading in the past, sometimes you forget about the value of it. But think about it in terms of, if during quarantine, during COVID, if you just stayed inside, never saw any sun, didn't get any exercise, you feel depressed, you feel lethargic. And then think about the version of your life where you wake up early, you go surfing, you get in the cold ocean, you get exercise, you get vitamin D from the sun, and how that motivates you throughout the rest of your day and informs you throughout the rest of your day. You go through the rest of your day sharp, processing information a lot more effectively. You're more motivated, you're more kind, you're more ambitious. Reading does that for the mind. So if you wake up in the morning and you don't read, or you don't read throughout the day, if you become in this kind of atrophied, your brain starts to form nubs over it and it atrophies, and there's less receptors open to receiving information and to growth and all those other things. It's exercise for the mind. You're doing push-ups for your mind simply by reading, What are you laughing at?
Brain Nubs is the name of my
Exactly.
new band.
Well, I'm thinking
Not Brain Nubs.
your synapse, your receptors, there's synapses that jump from receptor to one another. Those get nubbed over and the synapse can't jump and fire. This is all
Synapse
a,
Nub.
this is all a scientific explanation, by the way. I don't know if you
Oh,
knew
of
it or not,
course.
but I am a doctor.
Well, read more. I want to hear from listeners about what you're reading, or if you're inspired to read more. And don't be ashamed if you're not reading. I get it. David just mentioned sometimes we forget. Um, and I'm a slow reader. I mean, I'm reading the same two books I've been reading for a couple of months, but I do have two books, and I read them almost every day. I read some this morning. And
I disagree,
there's
though.
so many great books out there. I mean, it's incredible how many great books there are.
I disagree with your thing telling listeners to let us know what they're reading. I don't want to hear what listeners are reading. I get enough recommendations in my life. There's nothing worse. People send music like, hey, you
You're
should
right.
listen to this.
You're
I'm
right.
like,
I know.
you think I'm
But
ever
I'm
going to
trying to
listen to that?
inspire them, David. I'm trying to get, I agree with you. But don't send us what you're reading. Just, in fact, if you
Send it to a
do,
friend who will take your advice. We have no
right,
interest in hearing what you're listening to or what you're
right.
reading.
You need to use reverse psychology. You need to come in with, I'm not reading shit. And then we'll know, maybe the guy is reading.
Exactly.
But I
Well,
do appreciate you sending me that podcast from the guy who wrote Sapiens.
oh yeah.
How do you pronounce his name anyway? I always mess it up. But anyway,
Yuval
so
Noah
I
Harari.
turned that podcast onto some friends of mine who are readers, and now they're inspired to read Sapiens, which
Yeah.
I'm still reading.
Well, the other thing about that guy's email was
The state of the school system.
the state of our system in general. Like, honestly, that is reflective of work environment, that's reflective of political environment. It's a reflective of how people are raising their kids, where rather than holding them to a high standard, I was having this conversation. I don't want to get fully into it, but like in surfing, part of calling somebody a kook and harassing them, and not harassing them, but like giving them a hard time in the lineup, is not to, I mean, it's because if you're part of if you're part of our brethren, we want you to be better at what you're doing. Like, I'll make fun of my friend if he dodges a section or doesn't crack a lip or something, because like I want to see him the next time he goes out crack the lip. And for that to now be qualified or classified as bullying is the wrong direction. You know what I mean? That's not bullying. That's me and my friend. We have this implicit agreement that we're going to razz one another to bring out the best in one another. And
Yeah.
so the fact that that's entirely eliminated from schooling, any sort of accountability or being held to a standard of somebody who came before you that was better than you, you're not allowed to do that because that'll make you feel bad about yourself and ruin your self-esteem, is absolutely not going to net progress. It's going to net regression.
And I sense too, like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in some regards. And what I mean is, there are parents, and I'm one of them, who saw the public school system failing. that sees a lack of accountability and goes, you know what? I want my kids to have some better education. The public school system's kind of lame. They're just like pushing these three kids through because if they don't, the teachers are
Totally.
going to look bad and the teachers union's going to blah, 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 blah. So, and there's a whole bunch of parents like this. And I'm not saying this is okay. I'm just saying this is what happens. We take our kids and we put them in private schools because we sense that in private schools, at least we as parents, because we're writing a check every month, have the ability to hold not only the kids accountable, but the teachers and the administration accountable. And
Yeah.
there is no teachers union that we butt up against. And we go, hey, look, here's the deal. We want them to read more or whatever it is, right? And our kids all get spit out of this system that we assume is educating our children better. And then they go on to these other better schools and so the sad part there is that there are parents whose kids deserve a really quality education and some accountability, but because they don't have the money to go to private schools because it's expensive, don't get that. They get their kids spit out of the public school system, which I know there are great teachers out there.
Totally.
But
Teachers aren't the problem.
they're almost more like, at this point, they're almost more like mentors than educators.
Well,
Like the
they're
great ones that my kids look to are like, I enjoyed going to his class because he brought up we
yeah.
had thoughtful conversation about deep stuff. He wasn't just going, okay, get ready for the test. We got to spit you out with an A and, or whatever. Again, I speak from ignorance. I don't really know too much about what I'm talking about. I do speak from my own experience.
The red tape and the bureaucracy is what prevents the teachers from doing their jobs. My mom works for a school district which will remain nameless, and she has my entire life. And over the years, I've been horrified at the stories that she comes home with, like she'd be downtrodden after work. And I'm like, what's up?
Yeah.
And she's just like, you would not believe the corruption that I witness and how somebody gets a promotion at their job. And anybody who ever says anything ends up getting fired or losing their job. And so
it's hard to get fired from the teachers union.
Well, they're not always teachers,
Yeah.
They might work at admin or whatever, but the downtrodden was her knowing, man, I can't fix this system. I have to, if I want to continue to raise my kids and be able to put food on the table, I got to keep going to this thing and perpetuate this cycle. And it sounds like our listener has opted out of it. So I should actually email him back and figure out what's plan B. I mean, if you went to school and committed your life to this, and honestly, it's kind of a civil service thing because teachers aren't making any money.
Yeah.
You're doing it out of the kindness of your heart. What's plan B? And how bad does it feel to get slapped down for doing your passion project,
Well, it's fascinating because there's so many industries where disruptor is like has been the sort of, for the last decade, it's been sort of the buzzword, like let's disrupt this industry. And so if you were to say to this guy who sent you the email, or to your mother, or to any teacher that's frustrated, how would you disrupt this industry? Or it's not even an industry, but I guess it is. How would you disrupt education? And they would get out a big whiteboard and they would erase everything that exists now, and they would start from scratch, and they would create something different. And you just don't have the ability to erase the whiteboard anymore. That ink is stuck and permanent on the whiteboard, and it's just, there's no way to erase it. It's just embedded with red tape and bureaucracy, as you mentioned.
Well, part of the email that I deleted or that I edited out was he was talking about the administrators, quote unquote, they have like an allowance for their car and all this kind of fat built into their job and comfort, and the bonuses and how much money you get next year and all that is based on the success of the students. So that's where that crux comes in, where they're incentivized to get students to pass classes, even if the students aren't capable of passing the classes based on the standardized testing. So all that they do to protect their car allowance essentially is lower the standards. So it's this kind of 1% model of, we're going to protect our comfort and our well-being. And by the way, we are philandering. And like I said, from my mom's backstories, there's all this corruption going on. But I'm not going to hold you accountable to make you do your job. I'm just going to lower the standard so that I could keep doing mine over here without making it harder on me.
I mean, the ultimate proof of all this is all these remedial classes in college. I don't know, it's something ridiculous, but like 70% of students that go into college have to take remedial math and remedial English to just get to the intro class. You can't even get into the intro class until they basically give you high school in like 2 semesters.
Crazy.
They're like, here's high school. Let's just do it all over. If you care about this, you're going to pass. If not, you're out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden people are like, oh shit. Yeah, I do want to get a college degree. And so people get into it. Actually, it's kind of interesting because at that point they realize, oh, you know, it's time for the metal to, you know,
I went through that experience.
To hit the fan.
When I went to college, I honestly had to learn how to do homework. I spent the first couple semesters like, oh my gosh, I actually need to read this and do the homework to get a grade on the test. Because in high school, I honestly never did homework. I just I'd go to the class, maybe I'd absorb some of it, show up at a test, I'd get an A on the test, did 0 homework, and would get a B in the class because of the way that, you know. So what's sad about all of this is that if you are a student who has some level of intelligence and some ambition.
This is not about surfing. We have not been talking about surfing at all. Right. Hey, the only thing that's about surfing is those 2 surfboards that are behind you.
Okay. The hard pivot. Literally an hour after we published last week's episode, the WSL released news, a huge news story. And part of my story last week was, hey, where's our update from the WSL?
I know. It came out like literally 20 minutes after we went off the air.
It was crazy. So huge news from the WSL is that the 2021 season is on. Pipeline is on. Maui is on for the women. They're launching the season where it formerly ended in previous years. The other huge news stories is that Sunset is being added to the men and women's tours, as is Steamer Lane in Santa Cruz. Steamer Lane has been a stop on tour in the past, so it's coming back. This is the first time that Sunset's ever been on the championship tour. And
no, it's been on the tour before.
Sunset was?
Yeah, on the IPS and the ASP.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, the World Cup for sure.
Oh, the World Cup, I didn't know it was on the CT.
Well, it wasn't even called the CT back then, but
okay.
Anyway, I feel so I feel vindicated. You know, I've been barking about Sunset Beach for 15 years.
Literally.
And I'm so stoked that Sunset Beach is on the tour.
You've been harping on it on this podcast for the entirety since the beginning, since episode 1, probably.
Yes.
And so
imagine before then, when I was on San Diego radio, I was barking about it.
Well, look, I'd like to think that the WSL implements all of our genius ideas because they hear how genius they are. Yes. But the other thing is they're limited by COVID this year. So it seems like they're trying to reduce jumping around from place to place. And so run as many events as you can in Hawaii while everybody is there for Pipeline. And Sunset is a logical choice. This lineup, by the way, the season ends at Trestles this year. So it starts at Pipeline. The final event, which we talked about in a previous podcast, you only, I think it's 5 surfers get entry into the final event.
Yeah.
And then it's a surf off in the final event. So a little bit different format and structure than previous years.
WSL season finals.
Yeah.
Single day. It's a single day world title competition. Sorry, go ahead.
And that they explained all of that format previously, but they didn't release the venue until last week. So the venue is Lower Trestles.
Yes. One day event at Lower Trestles to determine the world champion. It's called the WSL Finals. Feels like they could have branded that something a little bit more splashy, a little splashier.
Right.
You know, like, you know, there's a Super Bowl, there's the FedEx Cup in golf. There's, I don't know, WSL Finals feels a little not thought out.
Well, look, there's finals in every single event. So it's also a little bit confusing, you know?
Yeah.
So I will start by saying this is maybe the best tour schedule I've seen in some time, to be honest. I mean, we can discuss whether or not it's good to start with Pipe and end with Trestles, as opposed to starting with a slow start and ending with a big finale. But in terms of having Pipe, Sunset, Steamer Lane, I don't really care about. Portugal is being moved up until, I think, the right after February, maybe March time window.
Hold that thought on Portugal.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So it looks like Portugal is moved to about March. And then we have Bells, Margaret's, Gold Coast, G Land, Brazil, J Bay, Lemoore, the wave pool, and then Tahiti and Lowers. So all in all, I think this might be the most well-rounded tour that we've seen in some time. I would still ditch the wave pool firstly. I would ditch Brazil. But other than that, I think it's a really strong G-Land, phenomenal addition.
Yeah.
So
No, I love
I
it.
think
I like most of it too. What I hate though, I absolutely hate that the tour doesn't end at Pipeline, that it doesn't end at a wave of consequence. I think it's just weak. It's
so. The
it,
tour actually ends in Tahiti at Chopu.
okay. Mel, maybe I should eat my foot there, but the finals. I feel like the finals. Um, Yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on that? Is that enough of a situation where you're going to get the top five that charged at Chopu and deserve to get in, or can you be in the top five, go into Chopu, maybe get through a couple heats, and get and then lose, after the second or third heat, and make your way to the finals at
I
at Trestles without having to show your stuff?
uh I no, I don't think you can get through without having to show your stuff. I think this is it. We'll have to kind of see how the math all plays out.
Yeah,
We'll need hindsight. Will really make this a lot more
yeah,
clear. But I'm
yeah,
optimistic about it actually. When
yeah,
we first saw that Pipe was getting moved to the beginning, I was against it. But the more I think about it, the more optimistic I am about it. I
yeah.
think it's more important to come out of the gates, like start the season with a huge event for one reason. Uh, I feel like there's been too many slow starts to too many people. Like Gabriel won 2 world titles with very, very slow starts. He didn't start winning events till the back half of the season. And that's just not good viewing. It's not dramatic sporting viewing, you know? Like, I think the stakes need to be high. I think for anybody who isn't willing to paddle out at Pipe and go on a set wave, go sit in the back. Like, you are not welcome to a front seat of this, the rest of this. The fact that you could show up at previously at the Gold Coast and surf 3 foot waves into a, crazy air, and that would suddenly have you in first position on tour, I don't think is the right direction for surfing. So throwing them out at Pipeline, Kelly and John and Gabriel and Idolo are going to come out on top. Like, those guys are the best surfers in the world. They should be on top. And then that list gets refined through high performance events, but ultimately comes to a head again at Chopu, where you have to do what you did in event one. I like all of this.
Yeah, it does make a ton of sense now that I start to digest it. And I haven't looked at the schedule on paper the way you just laid it out. I just know that the events, that we start here on the December 8th. But I was thinking about waves of consequences as you were speaking there. So we've got Pipe, as you mentioned, then Sunset, and then there's G-Land is, I guess, a wave of consequence. It's borderline. It's such a perfect wave. Even when it's 6 to 8 feet, it's those guys, it's going to be, I don't think it's consequential. Not not on the level of Pipe or Chopu. Sunset Beach. So you've got three legit waves of consequence. J Bay is kind of like G-Land. It's just perfect. Um, so there are three waves of consequence that the surfers will have to deal with, right? And so that is interesting.
Well, variety. So there's 3 waves of consequence. There's 3 waves that are perfect, like you said. So, there's a certain style of surfing that can be showcased on perfect waves. There's a certain style that can be showcased via consequence. And then they have rippable waves on tour as well, from trestles to snapper and Brazil, depending on where they run that. So I like this a lot. I think this is a really well-rounded tour. Now, let me ask you, how do you feel about the finals day being at Lowers? There being 5 world title contenders that get entry into this event and they duke it out on a high performance wave as opposed to duking it out at somewhere more consequential.
Well, it's in September, right?
Yeah,
I would much rather have them, if they just have 5 surfers, go down to Puerto Escondido.
I agree.
Go down to Puerto Escondido, man. Let's see some friggin' radical barrel riding, some thumping. Let's make this the Super Bowl. Trestles is just soft. It just is. It's not exciting to me. You know, I mean, maybe I'll be excited in September. I'll be like, okay, cool. We're going to see some ripping, whatever. I want to see them. There's only 5 of them. You could do an insane, you know, in one morning at Puerto, you could have an insane finals day. It would be mind blowing. And to me, that's the go-to in September. Puerto Escondido.
It's troubling to think that, again, we need to see how the math shakes out, I guess, because I don't fully understand it, but it's troubling to think that somebody who's like a small wave wizard could beat Kelly Slater at Trestles. You know, like Felipe Toledo could beat Kelly Slater at Trestles. Like anybody, I would bet money on that right now that in their current.
Yeah. I mean, look, Gabe, all 3 of them.
Well, those guys,
3 of those Brazilians.
Yeah, but I'm fine with Gabe and Idolo because they can also get barreled at pipe when it's 10 foot. So if they beat Kelly at lowers, I don't really have any qualms about that because they're a more well-rounded surfer at this point. But somebody like Felipe, it troubles me that somebody like Felipe would then beat somebody. Kelly's the only example I could think of. I don't know if he would beat John at lowers, but you know, that the fact that the wave really benefits like a very specific thing. I mean, it's like you said, it's a soft wave. Speed, riding a groveler that you could generate a bunch of speed on is going to be a huge virtue there. So as opposed to like technique. And
as we break down the rest of this too, sort of the elephant in the room right now is the spike in COVID cases. Like, is Hawaii going to go? They just opened up, I think, October 15th. You can go there if you have tests, if you get the tests and everything. Like, there's a way to get to Hawaii. But is this recent spike going to make the state of Hawaii kind of go back into restrictive lockdowns and not allow for tourists to show up? I don't know. But there's a spike right now, and you know that's got to be a factor.
I'd be equally as concerned about Portugal for March. Like, honestly, Europe has more strict mandates than Hawaii does. And even though that's a ways out on the calendar, I mean, this thing's around for a while, you know? So interestingly, on the WSL's website, I noticed they just updated Portugal to say postponed. I'm pretty sure that they had the dates in there previously, and now it says postponed. So I don't know, maybe they do have updated COVID information there. But look, the idea that this tour can run in its entirety as we described it is not a foregone conclusion. It's not guaranteed. Like, it's all subject to COVID.
Let me ask you this, at the risk of sounding sexist. They're running the women first. December 4th, the women kick off at Honolulu Bay. Okay. So the beginnings of the WSL tour start with the women in Maui. What are your thoughts on that as regards to, marketing the 2021 tour?
I hadn't thought of it at all, and I don't think it matters at all, to be honest. I mean, pipeline is the draw. So whether it's women or men, the venue is kind of what the big marketing draw is. So I'm sure it's a logistic thing for kicking off Maui first, but Maui's never going to draw the eyeballs that pipeline does. So
yeah. Well, of course not. Yeah. All right. Well,
hey, I'm excited.
I am too. I hope everything rolls out. I'm going to start the drum beat right now for this thing ending at Puerto Escondido. This is real waves, real men, the world's best surfers and the world's best waves. This is what we want. We were going to have plenty of high performance surfing all year long. There are plenty of spots. And yeah.
Well, in 15 years from now, maybe they will concede and give you what you want.
They might.
So, all right. Well, what else you got?
Well, look, sadly, John Shamuka passed a couple of days ago. There's no details. Sean Doherty wrote a pretty good piece a very good piece on Surfline. And just reading between the lines, it feels as if maybe he took his own life. That's sort of
Yeah.
what everyone's kind of saying without saying it. And he was a great broadcaster, a great
Hmm.
commentator, had brought a lot of energy to the microphone. I really enjoyed listening to him. And and I've seen John in action a few times, and he's not somebody you want to screw around with.
What kind of
So
action did you catch him in?
I I surfed with him at Swami's a bunch. He's a great surfer, obviously. He was on tour. And I actually have seen him on the North Shore a few times, and he's kind of a pit bull. And I've seen him go after guys, like
Tell me. Give me a
on the
story.
beach in the sand.
Give me a
Uh
story.
just there was one surf photographer, and I forget the guy's name, but he was kind of like creepy. I forget his
Sarge?
name. No, it wasn't Sarge, but he was an American guy. But I saw Shmuka just lay into him a few times and just basically like drop all his stuff and just go, let's go, like just screaming out, bellowing out of his lungs, and the photographer just sheepishly trying to go, oh, that's not what I meant. Oh, I didn't mean it like that, or whatever it was going down. And Shmuka was like, come on, it was, and I've seen him be pretty loud and vocal in that one stretch there between pipe and off the wall.
Yeah. This is, and by the way, he was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
Oh, yeah.
So there you
Okay.
go.
Well, he had
Um,
me scared. I'll tell you that.
yeah. So a pit bull's a good way to describe his stature. He's
Yeah.
shorter and not by any means like overweight, but just like a rotund kind of bulky guy. I wouldn't say he was super muscular, but he also wasn't overweight at all. He's just like a pit bull. But phenomenal surfer from my youth. He was kind of a sparring partner for Sonny Garcia. I thought of them as kind of being in the same contingent, coming out of Hawaii, being aggressive, powerful, power-based surfers. And he won an event in Japan. He actually got second to Sonny Garcia at Bell's in 1995. He moved to Australia to raise his son with his Australian wife. I want to say like 10 or 15 years ago. He turned into managing surfers. So he managed Craig Anderson through the peak of his career, managed Jordy Smith. He's gone to work as a broadcaster and for Wsl in some capacity in recent years. So I was actually in Australia last year in March, and I actually spent a week with him. He was kind of my liaison at the event there and trying to hook me up with an interview with Slater the whole time, who skirted me deftly. Um, Slater's like, no, thanks. I've heard what you guys say.
No, I'm so pro Slater. Are you kidding me?
I'm not joking though. That's
Yeah,
what
I
the
believe.
vibe was.
Yeah.
And so Shmoo though the entire time was so cordial. That was my only personal experience of ever interacting with him,
Yeah.
was that one week in Australia. But he was the ultimate kind of host, and managing everybody and really managing Slater too in his time because he had a bunch of obligations there. But with a smile, there early in the day, there late at night, working all day, just really a consummate host and professional. I have nothing but I like loved the guy from just that amount of time that I spent with him, which is a lot of everything that you read. Everybody says he's the life of the party and really positive and funny. And if you followed him on Instagram, you would see a lot of that humor, him doing little surf reports and stuff. But apparently his wife passed away from cancer 14 months ago.
Mm.
And yeah, sadly, we don't know what exactly transpired in the recent weeks, but he took his own life. And I think what's interesting that I like about surfing is when something like this happens, seeing all of the tributes, and especially that era, that group of people was so tied. I think, a lot of the momentum generation guys, but even kind of a degree or two beyond that, there were such tight connections because it was the same people traveling around the world together. And then if you weren't on tour traveling, you were providing accommodation for when everybody came to town. So there's this kind of large 100 to 200 person group of people that have all of these formative experiences and a lot of visuals to show for it, photos, videos, all this stuff. And so when this sort of thing happens, it's always really moving for 2 or 3 days to see everybody chiming in and telling their own anecdote and story about, the people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's a sad deal.
it's a really sad deal. And honestly, it's worth you and I kind of focusing on the idea of depression and the idea that it isn't openly discussed, certainly among males, I would say. And I think it's at record levels. I don't know if it's at record levels or if we're just talking about it or we're more comfortable talking about it than our grandparents were. But with the economy, with people losing jobs due to COVID, with people staying inside due to COVID, with all of the crazy politics like discussion in the US in the last year, like depression is a very real thing. Mental health, mental illness is a very real thing. Substance abuse is a very real thing. Alcoholism is a very real coping mechanism for a lot of people. And so depression is real, and it's not the same thing as feeling depressed. Clinical depression is inescapable, and people find themselves. We saw this with Sonny Garcia as well, a friend of John's. We see these people who we thought were happy every time that you encountered them. Clinical depression takes over, and you can't see the daylight, and you can't see that it's temporary, but every emotional state is temporary. And so they make these drastic decisions that are life-changing, certainly for them, but also for everybody around them and their surviving children, in a momentary kind of feeling, a temporary feeling. And so I think it's kind of really important to reiterate for everybody that everything is temporary and you will get through it, and it's important for everybody kind of on the outskirts to reach out to the people who you might sense are feeling some sense of depression.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, look, we all get low, we all have moments of where we're not, at our best, and then there's people that are clinically depressed, which is a whole nother level that I absolutely know nothing about. Yeah, I've had some low points in my life, but I've never been like, people wake up on a sunny day and it just feels like it's raining and the walls are closing in. At least that's what I've been told.
Exactly.
And there's really, and from what I've been told, I've got a dear friend that's a psychiatrist, and it's a level of doom and gloom that you and I wouldn't know unless you were clinically depressed, like unless you were really in that space. I will say that I'm also in a mentoring group with men, and one of the things that we sort of, it's a little bit trite, but we often say, if you want self-esteem, you need to perform esteemable acts. You can't think your way into self-esteem. You have to do stuff. It's action oriented. What have you done for your community? What have you done for your family lately? Have you done something completely selflessly without expecting anything in return? And don't even let anyone know you did it. And I think that's a pretty good saying, if you want self-esteem, do something esteemable.
Totally. Well, there was a great comment. I think it might have been on Beach Grit, and I've edited it a little bit, but I'll read the edited version. It says, we all need, this guy started out by saying he's a counselor, mental health counselor. And he said, we all need to be connected, valued, and have a role. And any projection of a person any projection of the person that we should be, or the person that we could be, any projection that we place on ourselves or that gets placed on us by society to be a successful, be a provider, to be loved, to be strong, is a private thought cancer that strikes at many of us. So he's saying these projections that we wake up in the morning, we're like, oh, I got to go get it. I got to be successful. I got to be a provider. All of that becomes a thought cancer. He goes on to say, because sometimes as we lay awake at night, and especially in our later years, we run the benchmark over our lives. We aren't kind to ourselves. We don't see the positives in our life and our contributions. We only see the negatives. And it's a bad conversation when you're the only one in it. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. And, and we've all had those 3 a.m. Well, not, I can't say we all have, but I've certainly had those 3 a.m., oh my God, financial insecurity. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get that paid for? Blah, blah, blah. Those things, those times happen,
yeah,
and, and they're at their worst when it's just me, myself, and I just beating myself up about stuff.
yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to mention about John Shmuka is that era that he grew up in was tough. Like Hawaii surfers coming out of that era were badasses. Like you had to, if you got to the level of surf celebrity that he got to, you were a badass. Not only were you shredding because there was no faking it, you were also persevering tremendous, you know, opposition, just in terms of there weren't that many spots to be vying for. There was like there was no faking it. Basically, you have the entire world showing up on the North Shore to vie for the shot, and you had to outperform all of them. And then they all left, and all the cameras and everything go back to California and Australia, and you only have a couple months to perform. Like, he came up in a really tough era, and he did really, really well. So
you know um Pivoting from that concept to the North Shore and everybody being there and having to perform, do you think that right now that all of these industry houses are filled with surfers from the industry, and that it's as robust and sort of bubbling over with anticipation as it would be if this wasn't a COVID year? Or are things completely, like, is it thinned out? Or the crowd's thin? Is there really kind of hardly anybody there? Only people that are flying in for the pipe event? I mean, if you were to pick, oh, that's, speaking of which, next time we need to talk about this Survivor League, Survival, I think it's called.
yeah.
And we'll get into that. You and I'll have a segment on that next time. But if you were to, I guess what I'm saying is, if you were to pick somebody that's going to do good at pipe, it's certainly going to be somebody that's there right now surfing, that's a local, that surfs there all the time. There's no way some kid like Ethan Ewing, for instance, and I'm just throwing him in as an example, is going to have the time in the water at pipe that say Zeke Lau, or is Zeke even on tour?
I don't think so.
You know what I mean, though? Like a
Yeah.
local guy
Yeah.
that surfs there all the time that can paddle out and say hi to whoever and know everyone in the water.
John.
Yeah. So you sort of mentioned the guys, right? It's weird. Like, is Gabe there right now practicing? Is Ela over there practicing?
I don't know. No, I don't think
Noah?
the answer is to all those questions. No, the houses are not full. The beaches are not full. There's not a bunch of tourists. And I don't know. Those guys all should have booked a ticket the moment this press release came out, because that would be a huge advantage. Um, I do know they updated some news saying that there were going to be no spectators allowed on the beach as well. So that's not really to your point, but that is relevant.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. Get over there as quick as possible. There's never been a better time to actually get waves at pipe, probably, if you're a CT surfer, than this year. It's going to be less crowded than ever before.
Do you know anything about what used to be called the Vulcan Pipe Pro that happened in February? Any news on that? Is that a go, or as a QS, as a qualifying event?
I have no news on that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll try to get everybody up to speed. I'm sure people can find out between now and next week when we do our next show.
And you and I can talk next week too about some of the surfers, because Jack Robinson is making his debut this year. And I think that these events, Pipeline, G-Land, all that's bode well for him as a rookie. So there's lots of exciting things to start.
Jack Robinson could make the semis at Pipe. I think that's doable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And absolutely Sunset. Make the semis at Sunset. Yep. He's won there.
Yep.
He won there last year.
Yep.
So you could see Jack Robinson being number one going into the third event of the year in Santa Cruz. Is that where it is?
Yeah. But there's also, John could do well at both those events too.
Oh, no, for sure. I'm not saying he's the only one. No, I'm just saying.
I know, it's exciting.
Jack Robinson. Yeah.
It's exciting. It's exciting that there's a number of guys who could do really well there.
I'm rooting for Jack Robinson. I would love for Jack Robinson to be the world champion. And you know where he would do that? At Puerto Escondido. Jack Robinson's a guy who, if it's at trestles, odds are against him.
So that's my problem with this is if he goes in pole position into trestles and then, gets smoked by Edel or by, Felipe.
Doing 360 loops on the 2 foot left at lowers.
The way that the year is structured,
Lame.
though, I don't think Felipe could make it into the final event unless he did well at Pipe, G-Land, Tahiti, and all that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It's lots more to unpack in future shows. I
just had a little vomit in my mouth thinking about Jack Robinson going into trestles instead of going down to Porto Escondido for the final event.
Well, like we said earlier in the show, we need to strengthen his character and he needs to start shredding small waves. And I know in this off season, he actually has. He moved from Western Australia to the Gold Coast specifically to work on his small wave game. And I think that might prove to be a good move.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, Scott, can I show you what I got in the mail yesterday?
What'd you get?
I have a new album, Twinsman, coming with a pintail on it. So check these bad boys out.
Wow.
Ooh.
Those look really similar to what I got in the mail.
What?
Look at my album.
Dude, we got the same. Okay, we're holding up NVS fins right now for the camera. We literally got the same exact fin. You got the album Twins?
I think this is the quad set.
Oh, you got the quad set. Okay. Well, we both got albums, personal line of fins with NVS, Surf NVS.
Here's the back fin.
Okay. So what board did you get those for?
I got this for that Rawson, but I'm thinking about putting it in one of my Wayne Riches as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we need to do a deeper dive into quads because I wrote a quad the day before yesterday after kind of, I don't know, not talking crap
hating
about
on him. You hated on him.
So I also last week went and interviewed Stretch and we talked a bit about quads.
Oh, cool.
And so I was just kind of inspired to get back on one and see what's up. And I had a couple of really good turns on it. Like, I don't know if it's the board itself or the fins themselves, but a couple of like accelerated turns, like roundhouses.
Yeah. Where you get speed coming out of the second half of the turn.
Yes. And my buddy who was out with me, he's like, that turn looked good because it wasn't like a 2-stager. Right. And I'd like to think I'm not doing 2-stage cutbacks anyways, but I think what he was referring to, is what I felt, which was, it accelerated. It was like lean into the turn. And as you start to look back at the whitewash, like then it accelerates and then boom, bank off the whitewash straight into the bottom turn. And I don't know that I think maybe the thruster, there is more of a pivoting action. So the quad might've been what was to thank for.
There's quads are known for that for sure. Now tell me about the Gemini behind you. How big is it? Like the more I've been looking at that board for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think I'd like to ride that board.
Yeah.
But how big is it? Can you look?
I don't know.
How big is your album?
The album?
Well, because they look like they're the same size.
The
so
album
you know how big
the album.
Okay, let's put it up, measure it up against David's going to measure up the boards. I've got David. He's going back to the Gemini and looks like he's holding the Gemini now and he's going to tell me how big. It looks like it's got,
it has the Dems written right on it. It is 5'10" by 19 by 2 3/8.
Okay. That's not wide enough for me.
It's small.
And it's not thick enough for me. I need 20 inches wide, 2 5/8. And I need it to be, I think 5'10", because I do think it probably surfs a little longer because of the foam taken out of the nose.
Right.
Anyway, looks like a fun board, but kind of narrow for me, for this old man.
Let me know if that thing starts falling.
Oh.
I didn't place it very carefully. Well, at any rate, the fin box it's like the old FCS plugs in that. So I need fins for it. I don't have the fins handy, but NVS, surfnvs.com. Promo code is the word podcast. You get 20% off the Apex Series fins, which is what these are and what you've got there. And then, of course, so they're a new sponsor that we're thrilled to work with. We're going to be giving away fins as well for listeners. And then also Need Essentials has been with us for years, and that 30% promo code on the Prima Loft jacket is still functional. So use the word spit on needessentials.com in the USA. And that Prima Loft is just the best everyday jacket, folds up, mushes up into a ball. You can't, it looks like a puffer jacket. It's not a puffer jacket because there's no down in it. It's actually thin and lightweight, but super warm. And the 30% off I've just never seen before from them. So
spit in the promo code,
spit will get you that 30% off in the promo code. Prima Loft
right.
insulator jacket. My Duke, by the way, Scott, is Matt Warshaw. He's in the middle of his EOS fund drive.
Yes, I sent him $100.
Did you really? Good for you.
Yeah.
So look, he runs that business on a very limited, I mean, it's a small budget. The amount of subscribers that he has that pay him $3 a month is not a huge salary for him. And it's his full-time job. It's what he does. And it's a huge effort to archive and build, not only build the archive, but he's adding new stuff all the time. So it's a huge effort. And then once a year, he does this 1 week long fund drive. We are in the midst of it right now. So even if you donate or subscribe for $3 a month, consider throwing Matt another little bonus to get him through the rest of the year and support the work.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, I did that, and I agree with what you said. And in addition to that, in the same vein, I subscribed to the Surfer's Journal, which I hadn't subscribed to in a couple of years. I resubscribed because I want to support the print world. And I bought a couple of issues of Andrew Kidman's print magazine down in Australia. Yeah, Acetone. And they're sitting here in my dining room.
How good is
and
that
there's
cover?
Actually a pretty good interview with Tom Curran. And I'm pretty psyched on it. So
Yeah.
I just kind of gazed through it, but I'm about to open it up and look at it. So support the print, support Matt Warshaw if you feel so inclined, and do some more reading. Read some books. We want, and have your kids read books and become a member of a book club.
I mean, honestly, support the things that you want to see exist. And what I would say about Kidman and Warshaw specifically is that you will see the benefit of your investment in them. Like if they have funding, they're going to use it to generate more content and better content in 2021. And what that often means is just delegating out some responsibilities. Like if Matt could have somebody make his little videos for him rather than him sitting there trying to learn how to use Final Cut on his own, he would be freed up to write more.
No, I think that's what he wants to do. I think he likes to do. That's the one thing I think he enjoys doing is making those video edits.
Well,
but
then
I could be wrong. I don't know that, but
maybe I picked the wrong example. What my suggestion is that free up Warshaw to write and do the things that he is great at, and all this tedious stuff. Okay, accounting, bookkeeping, he should farm out, And so having an extra little bit of change in the coffers allows you to make business decisions like that. And we're at a point where we've seen the worst happen. We've seen Surfer Magazine go away. So support those whose content you enjoy that you want to see more of in 2021.
Men's Journal, perhaps.
If you don't want Men's Journal, don't send them money.
Okay, well, look, that's all I've got. I've got a heart out here. Until next week, when we'll talk about Survival, this new game that we believe, at least I believe, trumps Fantasy Surfer. Fantasy Surfer is gone, I guess. Right?
Yes,
there's no Surfer magazine.
It's called Fantasy Men's Journal now.
Went to manscaping.
Yeah.
Anyway, you and I are going to talk next week a little bit about Survival, the Survival League that my friend Taylor is making here. So anyway, till next time, adios and aloha.